Net neutrality is the principle of forging a giant defiant palm in between the internet service providers and the content the internet provides. It's the abstract term used to refer to the way the internet has traditionally worked for decades, now being codified into laws that are catching up with the tech.
Well, that's a great principle that even I can agree to. The FCC went well beyond that in their 2010 and then even more so in their 2015 OIO. It doesn't take 400 pages to codify what was just said. This is where most of the misunderstanding of what is and isn't net neutrality breaks down. While we can all agree on the philosophy and sentiment, what was passed in 2015 in America is another story.
Like in 2008 when the FCC extended out that palm and told Comcast no when they were caught throttling their customers' speeds.
In 2007, Comcast spokeswoman Senna Fitzmaurice said at the time, "We are disappointed in the Commission's divided conclusion because we believe that our network management choices were reasonable, wholly consistent with industry practices, and that we did not block access to websites or online applications, including peer-to-peer services. They also didn't care where the packets were coming from or what was in them. They just wanted to slow things down so the network could still operate. This is standard practice to handle congestion. They specifically used a Sandvine policy traffic switch 8210. You either get your data slightly slower or the network goes down. If it comes back up, it'll be flooded again." By the time the FCC issued its order in October 2008, Comcast had already discontinued the practice, which was a stopgap meant to prevent BitTorrent users from interfering with Vonage users. Following the FCC controversy, BitTorrent designed and implemented LEDBAT, a means of self-limiting its bandwidth when other applications are active. And for a time, Comcast implemented a fair share system that enabled it to limit heavy usage during periods of congestion in a protocol-agnostic way. The details of LEDBAT and fair share were published in Internet RFCs. So the problem was congestion caused by BitTorrent on a DOCSIS 1.1 network. It was resolved by DOCSIS 3.0 and dialogue between BitTorrent and the ISPs in the Internet Engineering Task Force Forum. The FCC's action didn't survive court review, but the issue had been resolved before the FCC investigation concluded. Comcast got this charge appealed in 2010 as the FCC had no authority to tell Comcast how to do its job, which, back in 2007, was an industry standard. Comcast said in a statement, "Comcast remains committed to the FCC's existing open internet principles, and we will continue to work constructively with this FCC as it determines how best to increase broadband adoption and preserve an open and vibrant internet."
The FCC listed their net neutrality rules in 2010's Open Internet Order, which asked ISPs to 1. Be transparent about how they handle network congestion, 2. Prohibit them from blocking sites on wired networks, and 3. To disallow unreasonable discrimination against online content made by competitors.
The 2010 OIO was 194 pages, again, well beyond the point of what the three rules were supposed to be. Instead, the debate we're having now, or at least what we used to have, was what was the underlying legal claim the FCC should have and what are its implications, which very few people were even aware of.
Those regulations were challenged in 2011 by Verizon. Their lawsuit against net neutrality persisted all the way to a federal court case that decided in 2014 that the FCC's first rule was fine, but the other two were too mean. And almost right away after the ruling, AT&T was already filing patents for bandwidth discriminating technology.
There's nothing really wrong with patent discriminating tech. That's part of every protocol or every piece of hardware on a network. Keep in mind that in this same article, it is stated that AT&T files a lot of patents for concepts they may or may not even actually implement. As such, there is no AT&T prevention of bandwidth abuse of a communication system I'm even aware of. However, AT&T is known to throw loads of lawyers at a problem to combat their own competition, but I'll talk about that later.
Net neutrality was in jeopardy yet again.
Before net neutrality was a thing to be considered, it had already ballooned to something else in 2010, let alone by when 2015 came by.
Which is how AJIT ended up on the board after the previous Republican left to work at Comcast, which is how in the midst of a lawsuit against Verizon, a former Verizon attorney has found himself replacing a Comcast hire and being promoted from commissioner to chairperson of the FCC by President Trump, all of which has me believing that this sentence right here on the FCC's own mission statement is one of those bits of legalese that starts to mean the exact opposite of what you think it means as your income level goes higher.
The gentleman is implying that AJIT is somehow being paid off of Verizon or lobbied by them or some other ISP. For that, I always ask for evidence. AJIT worked for Verizon from 2001 to 3 as Associate General Counsel, where he handled competition matters, regulatory issues, and counseling of business units on broadband initiatives. 4 years after, he started working for the FCC. In 2011, he was appointed by Obama for the Republican Party position of the FCC and confirmed unanimously by the Senate in May 2012. His term ended in 2016 and was appointed FCC chairman by Trump in January 2017. He's been a public servant for most of his professional life since working in government in 1998. I'm getting kind of sick and tired of people accusing him with no evidence of mansions or golden parachutes or anything like that, of being bought off by a company he last worked for working at said company for 2 years, 14 years ago.
It is in their best interest to charge whatever they can for whatever they can, and the reality for most Americans is that this is not a competitive enough market to avoid that kind of price gouging.
I agree, and that's what AJIT's main concern was. Not only was there no problem, the solution hasn't worked. The main complaint consumers have about the internet is not and has never been that their internet service provider is blocking access to content. It's that they don't have access at all or enough competition. These regulations have taken us in the opposite direction from these consumer preferences. Under Title II, investment in high-speed networks has declined by billions of dollars. Notably, this is the first time that such investment has declined outside of a recession in the internet era. When there's less investment, that means fewer next-generation networks are built. That means less competition. That means fewer jobs for Americans building those networks. And that means more Americans are left on the wrong side of the digital divide.
So, what's the internet going to look like in 2 years? Well, there's probably going to be gamer-specific ISP packages rolled out at some point.
Well, that sounds kind of awesome. A customer internet package to help improve ping rates dedicated just to gaming bandwidth. Okay, that could be bad, I guess. The gentleman here talks about those technologies that are already on the market.
They're not the kind of programs that anyone would ever feel good buying, so I have to wonder if they'd really catch on a big way. They just capitalize on how crappy the situation already is. Americans are not used to that.
And neither am I. So, I guess I'll just adapt, and if the ISPs are smart, they'll either make that part and parcel of a standard internet package, or maybe invent their own technology for a gaming-specific package. That sounds okay.
But if you're living in Trump land for the next 2 years, expect to be tempted to at some point buy this crap.
If people want a high ping, what's wrong with using a piece of software to do so? Latency has always been an issue online, so if there's a third-party app you can use to improve performance, that's kind of cool, right? The difficulty would be whether the game you're playing will actually allow third-party apps to do things and whether or not they ban you from using them. So maybe if an ISP started implementing that, that'd be better. Who knows?
That would be a more relevant problem if his ping was unacceptable to begin with because his ISP throttled his internet because he hit, let's say, a monthly 300 gigabyte data limit.
Maybe at the time the gentleman should be spending more money so he doesn't hit that cap, or maybe not download as much.
So what's also likely to happen are behind-the-scenes deals struck between game companies and ISP companies in order to try and preserve the status quo.
Not necessarily, although I don't see what's wrong with that. The game companies could simply start buying some EC2 servers from AWS and then some CDNs whenever their traffic is needed or wherever it's needed. It's really cheap. I mean, this is mostly to improve performance or ping, not necessarily throughput, which begs the question, why would anyone strike a deal with an ISP in the first place when traffic really isn't the problem?
And new businesses are going to suffer because of that. They're going to have to work harder than the previous generations did because the previous generation didn't have to fight for the privilege of being in a fast lane during their earlier levels of development.
There's been no real example I could find, so we'll wait and see if that's even a viable options for ISPs and individual online companies and why an online multiplayer gaming service would want to do that. I mean, that's anyone's guess. But for the most part, if you have even a 5 megabit per second connection, you're way more than adequate to play any online game. And in 1 hour of playtime, you'll take up way less bandwidth than your average Netflix user who needs, 25 Mbps. I believe one 25-minute game of League of Legends is about 25 megs on network traffic. And while I'm sure it's different for other games, online gaming has not been network intensive. It's virtually a non-issue.
Under Pi's proposed plans, there's no reason Steam or Origin wouldn't have to strike a deal for better access to a specific ISP's customers.
Okay, but why? How does having an ISP connection translate to gaming? And what do you mean, wouldn't? If it's working now, why change anything? What's the problem that needs to be addressed where an ISP needs to make a deal with, let's say, Steam? People are not going to buy a gaming package unless it A, provides better service for them that solves a problem they're having, like better ping or throughput or higher caps needed to specifically download games, or B, it's cheaper. For the gaming company, they need to have a reason to have a partnership with this ISP, like better CDNs or more or whatever, I don't know. If you don't have those two things, they're not going to do it, and ISPs have no ability to market to gamers. So what's the problem?
Or to even pay for the privilege of being included in those fast lanes in the first place.
A fast lane for what exactly? Again, network traffic for gaming online is nearly a non-issue. If we're talking about downloads, we're talking 50 gig or plus a month for a game download. And looking at the average type of data and its amount, simply put, that's really not enough data of a big deal for ISPs to take notice.
Because Riot Games, League of Legends, they already do this. Google, Facebook, and Netflix do it too, but Riot has an ISP partnership-powered network backbone they call Riot Direct, and it's an effort to work with ISPs to ensure that League of Legends packets are always getting sent to the fastest servers.
That's awesome. We're not getting charged a thing here. This is Riot being smart for their players. They have the money, they spent it. This is all win-win. In fact, the only major problem with games are their size for being downloaded, which, when looking at stats, shows not even 3% of bandwidth usage. So what gaming companies will actually be partnering for ISPs and why? Like, how will that work? Will that actually improve latency? Well, it's maybe. And if so, why would they suddenly start creating a gaming package just for that? This isn't the 90s where like a serious gamer of Quake, let's say, would want to install a T1 to his house just to have a dedicated line of 1.544 Mbps, just to get an awesome ping rate. It's a little different now.
Creating a unique network that their tech writer said was like building our own internet. But that's League of Legends, spending League of Legends money. The vast majority of game companies aren't going to be able to build their own internet to circumvent draconian ISP policies.
Considering last week we just got rid of a draconian ISP policy called the 2015 OIO by reducing regulations, and the ISPs are constantly upgrading their services, I don't see a problem here. Nor do I see a problem with game companies and their issue of bandwidth or paying for bandwidth when all they need to do is spend more money on CDNs, which has nothing to do with their ISPs. I mean, it can. If you ask them, I'm sure they'll give you some, but there are already cheaper alternatives out there. Isn't the internet just fantastic as is?
Steam, Origin, Blizzard, and Riot are all likely to be fine. They're advantaged already, but the growth of mid-sized competitor companies, the really good ones that actually could one day overtake Steam, like GOG or Humble Bundle, they'll be stunted.
Okay, how and why? GOG is just a digital download option, and to my knowledge, they don't house multiplayer servers, and even then, it's only an issue of latency, not file sizes. And the same with Humble Bundle. What's the problem here? Or are you trying to imply ISPs will simply block those sites because they have fast lanes with the bigger names? Why would anyone buy a gaming package if they specifically want Humble Bundle, but their ISP is blocking them? I'm not sure what the problem is here. So let's say they're not blocking any of these sites, and those big names do get a fast lane. So what? The issue would still be data caps for other sites. Or actually the fast lane especially. So let's say the fast lane, the big names who get them, are 0 rated. Again, so what? Well, that encourages people to download from the big names because of free data. If they get a better deal from a smaller company, well, guess what? They're going to go over there. They'll take the 50 meg hit download or gig download from their normal data cap. I guess they just won't binge watch House of Cards, I don't know, because they're playing the game they just downloaded.
Competing in a slower lane with a higher bar to pass than their predecessors did. Under these kinds of conditions and these kinds of markets, those big companies who were once the good guys steadily and inevitably become the bad guys, as no one better shows up to replace them.
How are they the bad guys if they have the best latency and they're charging you nothing for it while they upgrade their network to provide it? I'm not following this logic at all.
These are predictions that do look pessimistic, but they're already happening. After 2014, mobile companies don't have to follow net neutrality, so it's now not uncommon to find American mobile companies, like Verizon, offering free data when viewing content made by partnered companies.
Okay, Verizon offering the freebie service, or zero rating the Go90 network. Yeah, okay. The YouTube competitor, which is only available in America. Come on, this was a flop. I'm not going to go into the history of this, but if an ISP wants to promote their own service, like video streaming, and zero rate it, then they have to compete with every other video streaming service out there. Good luck competing with YouTube, Amazon, and Netflix. And I have to keep asking, so what? That's business. Businesses suck and fail all the time. That's how businesses work. Let them fail. Let them learn. Let Verizon learn how to be competitive or build a better video streaming service. That's how you get better. You fail and learn. Business is a series of failures until the 100th time you try it, you actually succeed at something. And who knows what that's going to be. Verizon promoting a crappy video service that isn't doing well, despite being zero rated, who cares? I can't even find it in my searches. The worst case scenario, they do well. They make a good service. They can open it up to the public, and they can actually compete with YouTube. How is that a bad thing? It doesn't seem like a big deal to me. No one else who not in America doesn't even know it exists. Whoop-de-doo.
Likewise, there is at least one Portuguese mobile company that has app-specific data cap exceptions that aren't a far cry off from the Photoshop dystopias.
This sort of thing has been disproven over and over again. This is already a thing in Spain and Portugal. These are add-ons to your existing service. If you're going over your caps, it's less expensive than the next package up. And it appeals to people who just want to use more data for specific apps like Facebook, Instagram, or whatever. For people who are heavy data users and like to micromanage, or who don't have enough money for the next tier up and are only using these apps, this is just for them. It obviously isn't for everyone, but so what? That's why they're add-ons. Who are you or anyone to tell these people what to do with their data and how to spend their money?
And a lot of the challenge was in keeping wireless business practices out of the same companies that provide our wired connections for home computers. And that's actually something that has me scared still, because have you guys been to a Best Buy lately? Computers are going away.
Well, I don't think computers are going away unless they're going to be packaged with an ISP solution. I don't get it. And two, there's lots of competition with the wireless mobile industry, and I actually wish there were more.
I wouldn't be surprised if in 20 to 30 years, the home wired internet connection goes the way of the landline.
In the future, we'll probably be laughing about using cable modems and other such tech at that time. I mean, telecoms will probably all be wireless. The barrier to entry will be kind of small, and there'll be all kinds of competition. This is actually one of the solutions that Google Fiber is coming up with, installing itself in cities, having wireless connections between home and node due to too much regulation to lay down fiber in the cities they wanted to go to. So you got to love that incumbent monopoly that's just blocking them at every turn. More about that later, though.
The oceans will close up and mountains will flatten by the time you finally get a hold of someone at Comcast.
Customer care is a huge problem for all companies. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. The bigger the company, usually the worse the CC. I know because my first job was a tech job working for T-Mobile in a level 2 call center. And whoever you get is random. You can get some really great people on the line or not so great. But when you buy a service from an ISP or mobile carrier or whomever, you're buying into their customer care program. But when you made that purchase, you're not thinking, wow, I can't wait to call customer care with a problem with my internet package. You're thinking of positive things like connecting to the internet and downloading stuff. Customer care is like going to a mechanic with your car. It's a necessity of life. It's going to happen eventually, and the only sure way to improve it is with, again, more competition. Remember what I had said previously? If you're for competition, you're against the 2015 OIO, that is net neutrality. Not the spirit of net neutrality, the 2015 FCC ruling.
Streaming over a constant hours-long video feed of an entire video game through the internet can actually be the cheapest way to experience a lot of older games at their most poverty-friendly prices. I mean, you get what you pay for, but the idea of net neutrality going away makes those products go away.
EA Access, GameFly, Amazon Prime, PlayStation Plus, Humble Bundle, and Steam have all existed before 2015. They probably aren't going anywhere, and if anything, they'll become better or different as their business model adapts. There's GeForce Now, Xbox Game, and I think Xbox Live Gold. They were around after 2015 came around, so it seems as if net neutrality has really nothing to do with any of these issues or any of these services.
I lived through it. I was part of a Comcast 300 gigabyte data cap routine that they were shelling out as an experimental temporary measure in Atlanta before Google Fiber set up shop. The moment Google Fiber set up shop, they rolled that change back really quick. But the point is, they got away with it. For about 2 going on 3 years, I had to deal with a 300 gigabyte data cap, and it fucking sucked. This apartment with like 2, sometimes 3 people in it would regularly go over. I remember the first time we went...
Okay, let's see here. Google Fiber rolled out in Atlanta in 2016, which means that was one of the lucky cities. Okay, cool. According to IGR, an average home in America in 2016 consumes 190 gigs a month, 95% of which is video. Both AT&T and Comcast have upped their usage caps to 1 terabyte. Now, this isn't that surprising. Data consumption or transfer is always expected to increase as technology gets better and streaming video gets bigger. But if one is complaining that their data cap is too low, maybe one should A, buy a better package to constitute your needs, or B, stop consuming so much.
You got 300 gigabytes. Games are like between 50 and 60 gigabytes nowadays, so that's you and all your roommates' allotment of like 2 games plus 6 hours of video a month.
So you're getting angry at yourself for consuming so much video and downloading a game and not spending more on your internet service so that you could do streaming video?
He often says that during the 2 years since net neutrality became law, investment in broadband has decreased by Oh my God. I can't believe it. The reports are true. Our numbers are down by 5%. Oh my God! Even though that kind of fluctuation has been super normal over the past decade.
No, as AJIT mentioned, it only went down on average during the recession and during the years the 2015 OIO was put into practice. Hence why he argued against it. I believe it was 12%. Now, do you recall the Obama FCC doing a proper economic analysis? I don't. Secondly, the Ars Technica article that references that image also references freepress.net, a blatantly biased website that only promotes net neutrality and never has spoken negatively about it. Even Forbes has contrary opinions. Free Press, the site that has Tim Wu, the creator of the term net neutrality, as a board chair. A little bit of info on that group. It was co-founded by a Robert McChesney, a Marxist. Normally I don't care where data comes from. I do my own analysis of it, but my apologies if I don't want to read through a 125-page document to discover it's a little bit biased.
Looking at 1 year of data isn't good statistics, and it's not even accurate.
By our own admission, or at least from showing the image, the data is several years. Of 5-6 companies, the data AJIT was concerned with was the year before 2015 and up till now, which there was a decline, hence why this is a big deal. He's looking at the money of the top 6 ISPs and their investment, whereas Free Press will argue it's gone up with a 125-page document. And as I've stated in previous video, as reported by ustelcom.org, 60 small internet providers have argued investment has gone down by $2.4 billion. So, on average, it's gone down from the 6 big ISPs from 2014 to now, and the 60 small ISPs throughout the country whose number one priority is to expand broadband infrastructure and investment and provide cutting-edge 21st century communication services to every American.
I also like how he constantly refers to the net neutrality regulation as monopoly-era rules.
Monopolies come as a result of government. There is no such thing as a natural monopoly. Go far back as the railroad and the formation of Ma Bell. Oddly enough, AT&T are still enjoying a monopoly of sorts, even booting out Google Fiber at certain cities. Oh yeah, remember Google Fiber? As of October 2016, it's dead. They stopped almost entirely. Since Google is trying to operate Google Fiber as a business, they're the new startup ISP. Now, this isn't entirely related to net neutrality. Google can front any startup costs. The problem comes in the form of municipal regulations. For example, in Tennessee, AT&T employed 5 times as many lobbyists as Google did, so it's 25 to Google's 5. Along with Charter, they've been filing lawsuits against Google for providing infrastructure or inaccurate information about the polls they're going to be using, to being unable to touch polls entirely that they share.
The FCC's own data shows that the vast majority of Americans only have a choice between 2 internet providers.
Yes, only it's worse. As I stated previously, AJIT Pai's main concern was, not only was there no problem, this solution hasn't worked. The main complaint consumers have about the internet is not and has never been that their internet service provider is blocking access to content, is that they don't have access at all or enough competition. Combine that with investment going down during those years, and you have no new ISPs popping up and no one to compete with.
Plus, the past 2 years saw an explosion in all the relevant online video markets across the board. Whether the company was big or small, whether it's Amazon Prime Video or Filmstruck or just more YouTube ads than before, the 2 years in which we did have net neutrality laws saw a skyrocketing amount of money being made with online videos.
The 2015 OIO protects content providers because ISPs can't offer paid priority, meaning content providers can't pay them whenever there's a problem. The bigger content providers get bigger. That's why Google, Amazon, and Netflix like it. That's the point. It's more money for them in their monopoly. Someone has to fit the bill for infrastructure and even increasing costs. And the content providers are happy it's not them, even though during 2014, before the OIO, some of them like Netflix had to upgrade anyway. Netflix was the original bottleneck, and they had to upgrade their own systems to meet their demand. Listen to Jason Stapleton as he explains what net neutrality is in under 3 minutes.
I'm a part of Patreon and able to be poor by selling skills. It's something they're passionate in that they love, like making porn.
Well, there's an interesting aside. What did Patreon do recently? Well, they increased rates on giving money to your favorite creators, basically a surcharge of sorts. People stopped using Patreon, and then what happened? Patreon rolled back the changes and apologized because they lost a whole lot of money, not realizing that they just made you, the patron, who gives them their money, and charged you a little bit more just to do what you always done. They raised rates for no reason. It's the same, or it's going to be the same issue with ISPs. They're not going to start charging you more because they can. They're instead going to offer you different kinds of packages specific to your needs, as well as add-ons or even a la carte options. They cannot sell you something at lower quality at higher cost unless you're an idiot. So please, everyone, stop whining about how the ISPs are now suddenly, because it's legally possible, are going to screw you over now that the 2015 OIO has been rescinded. This isn't going to happen.
They're creating media, they're creating value, they're making money, and none of that is going back to the old networks except for your monthly ISP bill.
Prove it.
If you want an actually valid, reasonable, understandable, and realistic explanation behind why these cable types are so spooked by net neutrality, the answer is simple. The next generation just doesn't want cable.
I think that's just a joke. The broadband, cable, or DSL providers don't like the 2015 OIO. You will see if you ask them. They all believe in the spirit of net neutrality. That is, no blocking, no throttling, and no paid prioritization. I think even the small guys are going to say the same thing. Now, unless it benefits them and the customer to do so. If it doesn't benefit the customer, they aren't going to do it. For example, would you want a throttled network when there's congestion, or no network at all when there's congestion? Which is standard practice. You have to throttle when things are getting lots of traffic. At least now, ISPs have the freedom to determine all of this by their customers' choices. By customers' choices, it's by what they're going to buy. Now, I can keep going through this video, but the rest of it is pretty much the same stuff. Regulations are bad for business. It's pretty obvious. Federal ones, municipal ones, state ones. If a regulation doesn't promote competition, it enforces the status quo. The Title II regulation, or the standard, wasn't really a death knell to broadband providers, but it certainly slowed it down. And historically, this forms monopolies. Investments decreased, even Google Fiber stopped, and really the 2015 OIO was nothing more than the FCC trying to impose rules that it didn't need. Throttling is a fact and standard practice of networks the world over, and paid prioritization is fine if nothing is blocked. The OIO was and always has been a hefty helping of unnecessary regulations that hurt new businesses, and was still just a hypothetical solution in search of a problem. Remember, net neutrality is not the 2015 OIO. It was buried in there, but it wasn't good enough just to have all these other regulations to promote freedom.